Hello, everybody, and welcome to a really special, courageous conversation that is part of Tree Sisters' 8 Days of Resilience, where we are celebrating the resilience of women as part of International Women's Day 2021. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Pollyanna Darling. I look after community engagement for Tree Sisters and also Tree Sisters in Australia. And I am really thrilled to be joined today by BE Alink, who is the inventor of the Alinker, which is a three-wheeled walking bike that's bringing freedom and dignity to many people. She is a paradigm shifter, an edge walker, and developed the reverse design life's practice. And she's also a tree sister who's funded around 18,000 trees in the tropics so far, which is pretty amazing. So a really warm welcome to you, B.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Little correction, by the way, on the amount of
Okay.
trees. We already planted 32,000 trees.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
32,000, yes.
Thank you for correcting me. It's how great that it's so much bigger than I had my number down. So, I would really love to start with just if you could share a little about you. So I know you've done many varied and fascinating things in your life, and I'm just wondering what the thread is that you feel has sort of woven everything together for you.
Oof. Um, I think it's essentials like justice and respect. My grandma always said, like, every human being deserves respect. Every living creature deserves respect. So where I see that that's out of whack, I get I get activated, so to speak. I think it's very simple. And so it's not what I do, it's that I do and follow those values.
Right. Because I was reading before about, all the different places you've lived and all the different things that you've done, photography, and was there some glass project that you had in the Middle East somewhere, and building coffins in Africa. Like, there's these incredible diversity of activities that you've undertaken.
Mhm.
And so is it just the justice thing that drives you to? Do you want to share with us a couple of examples of how that's worked in your life?
Mhm. Yeah, I do think it's all about the same. Whether I build
Yeah.
coffins in the slums in Kisumu in Kenya or now have the Alinker, essentially it's all about the same. Like that we need people want to be seen and acknowledged. We're born as little quite ugly creatures that just want to be happy. But we live in a world where we're judged on what we have, the characteristics of our body,
Mm.
gender, race, disability, ability. Um, and we're not a sum of our bodies. We're not a sum of our characteristics. So I'm like where we are the same creatures, just want to be happy creatures. And we can let go of what we have. Our culture is, for example, something that we have. You can use it as a divider between us, or you can
Mm.
um, use the fact that we just want to be happy as a connector and then laugh about the cultural differences because very often they're quite laughable, actually. And if you take that too serious, you create a divide between people. But you just said the coffins of Kenya. That's one of my favorite examples of work that I've done. So I'm a woodworker, architect by trade. I was born, raised in the Netherlands, um, but I never felt home in the Netherlands. So I, at a certain time, and these are all long stories, but I'll I'll get to the actual work. So I came to Kenya and landed in some kind of project in the slums in Kisumu, eastern Kenya, and um, I'm from farmers' territory, and we're very sober people. So my grandma always told me 1 and 1 is 2, and if something is more complicated than that, probably somebody makes money. So if I see something else that is not, you put a seed in the ground, you put water, it grows. Anything that's more complicated than that, somebody in the equation makes money. So that's how I
Yeah.
look at the world. everything that's too complicated. It's like, is it for our benefit, for our wellness, for our all benefit, or is somebody just making money? Well, if you look at the world now, it's a little bit more complicated than one and one is two.
Yeah.
But when I came to Kenya, like the area where I come from, we have an expression and say, we look the cat out of the tree. Like when there's a cat in the tree, we don't jump in the tree and try and save the cat. But we look at the situation at the tree, how high, what's around it, if the cat has ways to come out. You try to understand the situation before you jump in. So when I arrived in Kenya, I know nothing about Kenya. I never study things in advance before I go anywhere. I just go in and show up, just being me. So in this project, I see a highway of walking people with big things on their heads. And it was literally on a dust road, ring road in Kisumu. It was a highway of walking people. And I just sat there for days staring, just acclimatizing myself. And it was in a time that the AIDS epidemic was massive, rampant. 1 out of 3 people was affected. People were dying left, right, center. Nobody of AIDS, of course, because the stigma was so big. And I was there to do a carpentry project with street boys and girls. So when I looked around, I noticed that people couldn't have a coffin for they already lived in the slums, so they were considered the poorest people in the country. And then they couldn't have a coffin when their family was dying of AIDS. And I thought, the lack of dignity at the end of their lives with the stigma of AIDS, that's just not right. So I looked around and I was like, raw timber, really cheap, plain timber, really expensive. I was like, I can plane. So I taught street boys and girls how to plane timber and I never made a coffin in my life, but I learned how to make a coffin, and we made coffins, and we made really cheap, good coffins for the poorest people, so that the poorest people who were dying at a high rate at that time had a dignified funeral. That to me is just focusing on what's just, what makes sense. 1 and 1 is 2. Raw
Yeah.
timber, very cheap. Plain timber, expensive. I can plane, I'll teach them how to plane. If you go to Kisumu right now and you say Babs, that was my name there, do you know Babs? Everybody starts doing this. And that's still going on. The project is still there. And that was
Wow.
in, oh my God, in 99 or something, early 99.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I really love that perspective that you're sharing of the simplicity of, just looking and seeing what's needed and responding to that need with what you have. Um, that seems like a very simple way to go through life. And um, yeah, it kind of blows me away, really. So I'm just curious about how you ended up in Kenya in the first place. What actually drew you there?
I was born in the Netherlands, in a Catholic family, and my mom hosted some missionaries. Not that we were very Catholic, because actually she ran out of the church, but missionaries generally ran out of the church as well. They used it as a way to be on a journey and to be on an adventure, really. Um, and um, and so I never felt home in the Netherlands. And when I learned about the storks, the birds that were migratory birds that had another home country that they went to, and I was like, oh, I'm like a stork. I've got another. Luckily, I'm not stuck here, because I didn't understand the Netherlands. I really didn't. Never understood what people were motivated by, which probably resides in the fact that my father died when I was 8, and I couldn't talk about death because people are too
Right.
uncomfortable to talk about death. And I was like, his death taught me how to live every day. The fact that we know that we're dying, maybe
Yeah.
earlier than we think, um, taught me how to live. So why avoid something that is so valuable? Um, and then I'm a gender weirdo, and everything was either boy or girl. And I was like, why am I a weirdo in my own country? I don't understand. So I think those things contributed to the fact that I didn't feel home in the Netherlands and didn't understand what people are motivated by. And then the Storks were like, oh, there's another home country. I have another home country. I know that because I'm not home here.
Yeah.
And then Africa was the logical way, because we're quite engaged with Africa through the missionary lines.
Right.
Not religious at all, but it's an easy way in if you want to do a project somewhere. So I started writing some missionaries. It's like, hey, I'm a carpenter. Do you think that within your project or within your area that you work, that I could, come and do a carpentry project? And then the guy in Kenya said yes. I got a letter back, because in that time you wrote letters, handwritten letters.
Yeah.
And then he was the first one to write back, and I was like, okay, I'll come and visit you. So I did. Went there for
Cool.
3 months, liked it so much, and then I signed up with VSO, Voluntary Services Overseas, from the UK.
Yeah.
And then I signed up for a 2-year assignment that also happened to be in Kenya. Not that was accidental, but interesting.
Yeah. Amazingly
Mhm.
interesting.
And then I
Um,
went to set up vocational trainings in the school for the deaf in South Kenya, against the Tanzanian border. So
cool.
with the experience of making coffins,
Yeah.
okay. you know,
You've done all the things I wanted to do but didn't do. So it's really great to hear about them. Um, I think it would be really great to sort of talk about resilience a little bit, seeing as this whole International Women's Day focuses on resilience. And I would really love
mhm.
to hear from you what resilience means to you and how it's shown up in your life, or how you feel that it is, how it relates to you really in a personal way.
Yeah. Um, the word resilience has, in this time of day, a very negative connotation with me, because people who've been trampled on, Indigenous people in Canada, for example, are always hailed for, oh, you're so resilient. But people shouldn't have to be that resilient to survive abuse, really.
Mm.
So resilience as a, I always, okay, let me, I always do 20 things at the same time in my head. But so resilience is, if I say to Indigenous people in Canada, like, oh, you're so resilient, it's so great. Um, I see a parallel with saying to people with disabilities, you're so inspiring. No, I'm uncomfortable with disabilities or people with disabilities, because it confronts me with my own mortality, so to speak. So instead of saying like I'm uncomfortable with not knowing how to talk to you, how to talk about like, what does it mean to have MS, or what does it mean that you just lost your leg, or like I have to get over my discomfort,
Mm.
willing to show up for you. I have to address my own discomfort. And so, but I don't want to be uncomfortable. So I say, oh, you're so inspiring. And I think the same thing with what I hear from people hailing people, Indigenous people, about their resilience is like, no, it's very uncomfortable to be white in this country and to having to acknowledge the abuse and the injustice that was done to Indigenous people and continues to be done to
Yeah.
Indigenous people. And instead of acknowledging that, which is the first step towards reconciliation, we hail them for their resilience and talk about reconciliation without acknowledging. So we perpetuate the abuse. Resilience, to me, the essence of the resilience that is not that, is what nature is. Like, nature is a regenerative system in which there is no waste, because it takes the waste and it morphs it into the next stage of regenerative cycle. Um, it is the acceptance of death. A regenerative system is the acceptance of death. And it is acknowledging that death is part of the life cycle. And so in the full acceptance of death, there's resilience of the species, because we're co-dependent on each other. I can never be resilient by myself.
Yes, so true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we're resilient in understanding that we're codependent, that we're in a system that regenerates, in a system where things are dying, where systems have to die, where new things emerge, and we need to all tend to that. And to me, the resilience is in the regenerative cycle of life, in which death is part.
Something that you said before about, there's no waste in nature's systems is reminding me of, one of the foundations of Tree Sisters is that it's all an experiment and you can't fail. And so I'm just thinking about projects or, activities that might be undertaken in a life or in a business or wherever, and they don't actually work out, that those we tend to regard those things as failures, that they didn't work out for this reason or because of that person or whatever. But if it's within that framework that you're talking about of, we're a match for nature and no there is no failure,
No.
those things that didn't work out are waste um to regenerate the system in some different way.
And not
Yeah.
everything is supposed to be successful, whatever successful is. Because if everything is successful, it gets convoluted immediately. Like, if you've got 100 seeds of a certain species, not all of the 100 seeds are growing, and not all of
Mm.
the 100 seeds supposed to grow, because the strong seeds needs to, the best germination needs to happen there. The rest actually goes back to the soil and makes the soil rich. They're still a very effective seed, just not as a plant. They were not supposed to become a plant. They were supposed to add to the earth, so that the other seeds can grow bigger and in healthy plants.
Yeah,
Um,
and perhaps our perhaps our cultural focus is too much on the seeds that are growing into,
yeah, for sure.
like we're so fixated by the things that are successful and that, you can see, and they're sitting there, in the light, being trees or whatever, whereas everything that has gone into that is kind of unseen.
Hmm.
The seeds that died and nourished the soil, they're not visible in the same way.
Hmm. Or the clouds, and where the clouds come from, and how the clouds are generated to then feed to the plants. And it's all a very intricate system that all grows together, and it all needs each other. It's a very vulnerable system too.
Yeah.
But that,
And
in the
so,
light of, like, if you see the regenerative system of nature and how that works together, and that death is part of it, and that, new emerging things need come out of death, and death is actually a very like the whole what do you call it, composting of dead material, that creates the food for what emerges. Without the composting, you don't have the healthy soil in which stuff can grow. And if you place that system on what we do in our society, we have systems that create waste. And instead of thinking like, how can we create a system that doesn't create waste, we focus on the waste as a problem that we're then trying to fix.
yeah.
In the meantime, the system that is not designed to be regenerative just continues to create those problems, the waste problems. And so that's my reverse design practices. Like, don't focus on those things as problems, because they're not problems. They're the symptoms of that system. So
Yeah.
if you focus on the problems, you perpetuate that system. And if you see those problems, perceived problems, as symptoms of this system, you go back, it's like, huh, that system is not made for us. Maybe I don't need to engage with that system. Sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
off my phone, I forgot.
You're reminding me of, so I read a report this week, which was written some time ago, but it's busting some myths around wildfires on the west coast of the USA. And one of those myths is that dead trees are a fire hazard and do not add any value to a forest. And so, where an intense fire has gone through and there's a big stand of dead trees, which apparently are called snags, which I didn't realize, um, some forestry practice has been to go through and cut those down because they're dead and so they're dry and they're a fire risk. But actually, there's a whole lot of scientific research that shows that those dead areas where the trees have died from the intensity of the fires are actually the most biodiverse areas in the forest, and they're critical for the life of the forest as a whole, because there's all these shrubs growing, low growing shrubs, which brings lots of insects, which brings all the birds in, and
Hmm.
the deer come in and they graze on the low growing shrubs, and then there's more prey for the predatory wolves and whatever else is living in the forest. So that really blew me away, that
Hmm.
the thing that you look at and you go, oh, look at all those dead trees that have died from the fire, is actually the most biodiverse part of the forest,
Hmm.
and is critical to the forest's ability to regenerate itself.
Hmm.
So yeah, what you're saying just really is reflected in that. And in terms of looking at the problem, people look at those trees and think they're a problem and they should be removed, and
Yeah.
that actually you know causes more deterioration in the health of the forest.
Plus that
So
we see trees, we live in a world where the value of a tree is measured in money, and then when it's cut and its timber is more worth in money than that it's in the forest. But that's so out of whack, of course.
yeah,
Um, but that's everything. Like we started measuring in money and in money only, and then I'm asking investors these days if they want to invest in the Alinker, and start negotiating the percentages of their return. And so, like, what do you plan on eating in 10 years? Your money? And it's like, what do you mean? It's like, as I say it, what do you plan on eating in 10 years? Because I'm planning to be on a farm and with people and eat stuff from our own land. And but we need to put effort into that to create a world that's actually livable. And we're in
yeah,
this moment in time without any drama, by the way, because I think societies or civilizations that do kills themselves at a certain time, and it's fine. Systems do need to die, and maybe species do need to die for something else to emerge. So I'm not attached to if humankind survives or not. But if we want to survive, we do need to do things really differently. And then we've
yeah,
got this moment in time for a few decades already. By the way, it's not like it just started. To really decide like who do we want to be if we want to survive as a species. And then there's things that we need to do really different, and then we really need to acknowledge, as an old Cree saying goes, when the last fish is dead and the last water polluted, we realize we can't eat money.
yeah.
We can't just measure in money because it's a dead end. It's a total and utter dead end. So
And so what are your thoughts on how we you know really build resilient communities that do lead to life thriving?
acknowledge who we are as conditioned creatures and decondition ourselves and recondition ourselves with something else. Like, I am a white supremacist unless I stop the behavior of how I'm being conditioned in a system that, stumps on, on a lot of people in the world and is
Mm,
not really designed for the well-being of all people equal. So if I'm not aware of that, I'm conditioned, I'm programmed to have certain behavior, to shop in certain shops, to eat the meat that in the meantime is directly correlated to the fires in the Amazon, for example. If I'm not willing to see those correlations, and if I'm not willing to be aware of how my behavior upholds the systems that I say I despise, I uphold those systems. So I think the work is, and that's in this time that we are in a collective experience worldwide of a pandemic, which is an ultimately a huge blessing, I think. I've seen how collective experiences behave after wars. I lived in Afghanistan. I lived in Indonesia after that huge tsunami. Collective experiences, people in a collective experience behave differently. They work through trauma differently. And something else emerges um, after and in a collective experience. And I think the pandemic is a collective experience that we're in that unveils a lot of the inequities, inequalities, unveils a lot of the greedy systems that really kill and abuse the majority of people and species, other people, species on this planet. And really to build resilient communities is not to focus on being anti-systems. The systems will crumble by itself because they're not sustainable. So what I always do in my life is like, for example, just in the Alinker narrative, we always say we have a healthcare system, but if you look at what it is, it's a reactive system that kicks in once you're sick. So it's more a sick care system. As long as we continue to say we have a healthcare system that we want to fix, we're stuck in the pharma-driven sick care system that we see that is not to the best interest of people. So if I call that a sick care system now, by giving it the right name, we need a sick care system. People do get sick, especially with the food that the food industry feeds us. But anyway, we need a sick care system. But if you call it a sick care system, then you can say like, oh, okay, so we don't have a healthcare system. But now I'm not restricted by the confines of the problematic situation of the sick care system that is not motivated for the well-being of people, but to make money over the back of sick people. So if I then turn away from it, it's like, oh, there's a complete empty area. Let's play. Now we can do something for us and by us and build community. So if you create something that is attractive, people will come. And the more people are attracted to what you're doing, the less the systems have a hold of you. But that means that you're acknowledging who you are, what you uphold with every purchase that you do. And so make choices in who you want to be and how you want to live. That's, I think, where resilience comes in, where we remember who we actually are, what we understand deeply. Because we understand deeply what resonance is with other people. We understand deeply what radical generosity is with each other. We understand deeply what being part of something is and how much we need that. We're dying and getting heavily traumatized in the systems that are not designed for our well-being. So I think remembering and reconnecting with us as, with ourselves as codependent creatures, where we learn to trust ourselves again, because we're congruent with who we chose to be. If I choose to be a kind person and all my actions have to be kind and congruent with that decision, it's not an easy task. Because I've been taught so many things that are not kind.
Yeah.
All my actions, if I buy Nike shoes, not so kind. If I buy meat, not so kind. If I like anything that I do in this world is not so kind in many ways. So if I really want to be congruent with my choice to be a kind person, it's a huge job, huge job. And it's not, kindness is not niceness. So that's different. So I think remembering and reconnecting in who we are as creatures that need to codepend on each other and co-create, codepend on nature, that's reconnecting with the resilience that we understand.
Yeah. So you, I'm really curious about your journey because I know you recently uh, have set up a farm, and I'm wondering how you went um, from the Alinker, which is this amazing walking device, to starting a farm.
Yeah, that's what people say, like, a farm? What do you mean? I thought you were selling bikes. So what happens is we talk to people all the time. I always say, like, it's not about the bike. It's about, like, in that context of, we have a sick care system. Yes, we need that. But people are at the receiving end of a sick care system, driven into poverty often. And if you haven't experienced that, the moment you get a diagnosis or an accident or something and are in the sick care system, it drives you into poverty. You lose your job, you lose friends, partners say, like, I didn't sign up for this. This is this is too uncomfortable, and you might find yourself alone. The stories that I'm hearing all the time of Alinker users are pretty shocking. So if you then focus on, like, okay, well, if we don't have a healthcare system, what is a healthcare system? Or system, but what is healthcare? To me, that breaks down in mobility, community, and healthy food. Community is important because, if anything that I've learned in the Alinker, is that isolation is a way bigger problem in our society than the physical stuff that people might be dealing with. Illustrated by a comment that I got a while ago from a woman who calls me and says, B, I have to apologize. I do not have a disability, but I'd like to be part of your Alinker family. That shows that we're doing something right. And because who wants to be part of a disabled community if you're not disabled? But people want to be part of the Alinker family because we're not focusing on a disability. We're focusing on the fact that we're people that identify as active people, want to have fun together. Let's do something meaningful together. Show up for each other. Make it a little bit more less daunting to live with a disability, because at least you're not isolated. You're in a community now. And if we make disabilities less daunting, then we might not be so uncomfortable around people with disabilities. So healthcare to me is the mobility, community, and healthy food. And then talking to people, like the one Alinker user that I have in mind, who lives on the farm, who's the owner of the farm, was twice his desired weight, has MS, CRPS, was raised in quite an abusive situation in his life, and I, he said, I know the things that I should eat, the non-inflammatory foods and whatever. He said, but 40 miles is the next supermarket. There's nothing in this holler that is, like, everybody's twice the body weight that they should have, because they don't have access to healthy food. So you can talk till the dogs come home about healthy food. If people live in a place where they don't have access to healthy food, or don't have the money to access healthy food, because crap food is subsidized, sugar is subsidized, processed food is subsidized. That's why it's so cheap. That's why I say, the food industry is by design to make people sick, to then feed the pharma industry and medicate people. It's a bit harsh to say that, and people are, your conspiracy. Is like, no, just look at the facts. We're subsidizing shit food, non-food, that makes people sick. And then the pharma industry just makes shitloads of money on insulin and all that kind of stuff. It is crazy that some 19 million people are pre-diabetic in the US. And with slightly different food choices and a little bit more movement, you reverse that to being non-diabetic.
Amazing.
And most people, half the people actually do convert to being full-blown diabetic. That means they become dependent on insulin, and that's an increasing thing. You need higher and higher doses. That market is completely insane. And that makes a shitload of money over the back of people. So creating access then to healthy food is like, you live on a farm, and there was a whole story around it. We will tell that one day, but it was like, why don't we start where you are on your farm, the Alinker family farm, and create a food hub, start growing food, and start building a food hub in that whole area that would feed 27,000 people in total after 10 years, or within the next 10 years or something. So that's what we started doing, to just be able to talk about what does it mean that people, you can't just hold people individually responsible for not making the right food choices, because the industry is all against you, because it's not designed for our well-being.
Mm.
So I think we should en masse, not en masse, but slowly decentralize cities and build up local communities and start, and we're not the first ones, obviously. There's tons of people talking about that for the last few decades, and we've been part of that. Start growing our own food again, and making farming accessible. That's one of the things. The Alinker family farm is completely accessible. There's 2 Alinker users. The couple that lives there, they're both Alinker users. They own a farm, so the farm will be completely accessible. It will be a sort of education center where people can come and experience stuff. And then the way that we make all the different components on the farm, I want to build it such that that farming itself becomes very accessible, that it's easy to start farming, because you can start here just with a little bit. Oh, that's awesome. And then you can experience that. And then once you have more land, you can extrapolate that over bigger land. But so not just creating an accessible farm, but also making farming itself accessible. Because if we think about farming right now, it's very farming, whoa, that's like
Yeah.
investments and land, and I need to sort of, farming is really overwhelming. So how can we make farming accessible? And with that, getting people access to healthier food, and understanding that food choices, not diets, because diets is just the next capitalistic game to make money, but simple food choices. How can you make that accessible again for people so they can
Yeah.
actually support their own wealth? Giving the right messages, because people even don't know what's healthy anymore, because the food industry is so messed up.
Yeah. And I'm thinking as well that what you're doing with the farm and um, with the local community is actually also building resilience into
Yes.
those people and that area, and potentially all the areas around it that might be sort of affected by what's happening there, which is pretty amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk about your own personal resilience and how you feel that's expressed within you, or maybe there are particular uh, stories that have built your resilience over the
Mhm.
years that you might like to share.
Yeah, I think that starts with the things that I mentioned. What happened young in my life, that my father died, and I realized, like, oh, people are disappearing. What's happening? It's like, oh, I understood as an 8-year-old girl that people were uncomfortable talking about death, and so they chose their own comfort in order to, and instead of showing up for a young family who just lost the father and husband. And then being a gender weirdo is interesting because I mean, I'm a self-acclaimed gender weirdo. People say, oh, you shouldn't call yourself. That's like, excuse me, are you telling me what I should call myself? Interesting, really? But what I saw around me when I, like everybody in Western world, mostly, sees boys and girls, and the boys are supposed to do this and the girls are supposed to do that. And I didn't fit. I felt differently. I remember in preschool fighting for a photo shoot that the boys had a big red locomotive, plastic, and the girls had a puppet, like a doll. And I was like, yeah, not. So I fought really hard with the teacher that I was going to be on the photograph with a bear, and I was on the photograph with a bear. That was my first gender victory, because I was like, not having that. I'm not a boy. I'm not that. I'm not that. Like, I don't know what I am, but I want my bear. So I'm sitting there really proud with my shirt on and my jeans on, and sitting in the picture like I'm owning that moment, because that's the first time that I stood up for myself, and I openly, and I was 3 or 4 years old. And so growing up feeling different than what I saw around me. And then in high school, I learned there were lesbians, and I was like, yeah, I'm a woman. I'm in love with women, but or I fall in love with women, but that was the only applicable term at the moment that was available, but it
Yeah.
never really resonated. And my brother was in a relationship with a transgender, somebody who had transitioned into her body that she felt was more her. And she was always teasing me. She said, if there's anybody a transsexual, which we called that in that time, then it's you. And I was like, nah, no, this is okay with me. Like, so I'm not that either. And I never had language for what I felt. And only later on, and only lately, actually, I started realizing how much freedom I had in the absence of language, because I had to
Mm.
invent myself. And so by inventing myself and creating a place for myself in this world, there wasn't a path for me to follow. There was not a role model. There was not, until I started meeting people that were like, when I saw Marla Glenn on stage, for example, I was like, oh, there's more like me. Yes. And I didn't know what that meant, but I had an instant like, yes, that's like, yes. Um,
So
and it,
I'm really curious because I'm curious about how you. So I'll just back up a bit. I had a similar experience as a child. I was always up trees. I got into fights with boys. Like, and people often said to me, "Oh, you're a tomboy." I didn't like that either. I don't know.
mm-mm,
I was like, "What does that even mean? Does that mean there's something wrong with me as a girl?
yeah,
That I'm not a proper girl?" And then, and my mum was a raving feminist in the 70s for a number of
mine
different
too.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so she was, she tried to kind of be very fair about what toys we were given. I had Action Man and all of that. And so there was this real thing for me around, obviously there's something I'm supposed to be, which clearly I'm not. Um, but I felt very worked on by the culture, that
Mhm,
even
mhm,
if I don't feel, even if I didn't, I felt like there was something wrong with me as a girl, but I clearly wasn't a boy, and
mhm.
where do I fit? But the pressure to conform to being a girl was incredibly strong for me, and I think I, you know, gave way to it, and I don't know that I would have had, well, I definitely didn't, and I don't even know if I have it now, that capacity to say, well, actually, I'm going to, not take any notice of all of that and make my own path. So I'm wondering then, you know, how is it that you were able to do that, to go, well, I can see this and I can see this, but actually, um, I'm going to make my own way with this.
I think I had a very strange father who taught me in different ways. No, seriously, oh God, um, he did things like we lived in a 3-story building, and then instead of bedtime stories, he would say, "Let's put that whole building up on the site, and let's go through all the changes that we need to make it livable again. At the same time, we're going to use the things that now emerge as maybe there's new possibilities because something new, like for example, the window would be on the grass. Take the window out, dig a pool, you got a pond in the middle of your room or something. But we went into detail about the whole change situation just by putting a whole three-story building upside down on the side, and literally going night after night after night to make it livable again. What are the adjustments that you need to make? Completely made up situations, and he always did that. Um, and he also asked me something really weird. And I was about 5 years. So I've been taught to think differently, and that
Mm,
is because my father was a bit weird. My mom also was not quite normal, and my grandma, as I mentioned, instilled a few things in me that are just my compass. My father asked me when I was 5. I must have been around 5. He said, completely crazy question. If you look at it now in the Netherlands, um, white people in the Netherlands, uh, he asked me, what do you do if somebody puts you in jail for something that you think? And then he taught me how to play chess without a board. So he taught me to think ahead. He taught me to not go crazy whatever happens. And in fact, that's a sort of training for a political prisoner. How do you not go crazy to the injustice if somebody locks you up for something that you think?
Yeah.
So I do shit on my head. I'm never bored. I don't even know what boredom is. And you can lock me up in a tiny room and I don't go crazy. Because I'm always having have a lot of stuff going on, and I'm keeping myself busy. And
Yeah.
I think my grandma was a very poor woman, and she always said, people can do they can take away everything that you have, but they can't take away your thoughts. So chin up high and you own your own life. That's how I was raised. So I think different messages from the parents, grandparents, made me into like, I don't give a crap about what people think. I'm going with, like, I can't trust anything that's out there. That was very quickly like, oh, people don't show up and they choose their own comfort over showing up for me. Wow, I lost a lot of faith in humanity there.
Yeah.
And then you had to fit in. And I thought a lot of those things that you had to do as a boy or as a girl were completely pathetic. So I was like, why don't they? The question, what do you want to do when you grow up? Who do you want to, what do you want to become when you grow up? That's always the question. And I always thought, like, why don't they ask me who I want to be when I grow up? Isn't that a more important question? And so many of those things that are so around me didn't make any sense. And I didn't have much respect for it either, because it was like, wow, that's really dumb. And I think the deep belief that you matter as a person, regardless of how much money you have, because that had nothing to do with it, um, grounded me in, I was very much wanted. My father and mother were deeply in love with each other, and we as children were very wanted. And I think
Mm.
the love and the solidness, like, you have your own and hold your own, is what, I don't know, made me just invent myself. We're inventors anyway. My father was also an inventor. So I think that that caused a lot of, yeah, just choosing my own path and just following where energy leads me. I just follow energy always.
Yeah.
So I do all sorts of stuff. I've done tons of stuff, but it's always about the same stuff. Basic
Yeah.
justice and basic respect for all living things.
How wonderful to have had that foundation. You know, that's a really beautiful foundation to have received, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So I am conscious of the time, and I'm just wondering if there is one message that you would like to share for International Women's Day, um, or around resilience, or whatever is in your heart right now as a way of closing.
Yeah, International Women's Day in itself is one of those things. I understand that we need to celebrate things in history, but I mean, we're 51% of the world population, like, and we're not much celebrated along. I've never understood as a kid why the creatures that can create life and give life and look after life are the ones that are abused around the world.
Hmm.
That never made sense to me, really doesn't. And I'm not a big fan of International Women's Day for that very reason, that I think every day everybody needs to be respected. and it sort of highlights the things that are out of whack. By
Hmm.
celebrating the one day, you sort of perpetuate the fact that it's completely out of whack. um, and I understand why it's a celebration, and I've always, or very often, joined the celebrations, but deep inside of me, it feels as a very unjust thing that we need to celebrate one day per year as International Women's Day, and whoopee, it's a big shit. But for the rest of the of the year, we can continue to let women disappear and be abused, and still have a salary gap and all that kind of stuff. That's okay. Like, it's no.
So what would you do instead? Tell me what you'd do instead if you turned away from that broken system and into the you know, the open space where we could do something different with all
Well,
the
first of all, it's not a
tools.
broken system. It's a very effective system. What I, if I could say anything, and call on people to do anything, is to stop putting ourselves in minorities and identifying with segments. Like, women are 51% of the world population, so we're definitely not a minority, yet we talk about women as a minority because we don't have the power generally. That's not a minority problem, that's a power problem. All the other minorities, whether you got LGBTQ or Hispanic or Black or like all those stuff that everybody's like, I'm in a minority and I'm fighting for my rights. And it's like, why don't we see the world as a vast majority of diverse people? And the people that are in power happen to look generally white, heteronormative, wealthy dudes, right?
Yeah.
They're the problem because they hold the power. There's a bit of a problem with that. Why don't we see that as the one minority that causes the problem? And for the rest, stop making ourselves small. We're not part of a minority. We're part of a vast majority of diverse people that have way more power if we just group together.
Mm.
And then say to the white dudes, like, really? We're not buying from Amazon anymore. Unless we decide today we're not buying from Amazon anymore. Today we decide for a month we're not eating meat anymore. See what's in the shelves next week. Unless we decide we're not buying sugar anymore. What do you think is in the supermarkets next week? Like, we have so much power, but any scarcity thought keeps us small and keeps us trying to fix the problems that we have in our little lives.
Mm.
We need to look at who we are when and how much power we have when we're together and when we can make decisions together. And we should make a
Wonderful.
few decisions together. Like, I like
Yeah.
the not buying at Amazon anymore, for example. I like them not eating sugar because it's a big industry, sugar or processed foods. Let's just decide for a month together. We're not eating that stuff. We're not buying any of that crap. Like, when I go to the supermarket, I can buy maybe 97%. I cannot buy because I'm not eating it.
Yeah.
That's 97% of the stuff in the supermarket should probably not be on the shelves because it's not for our wellness. Maybe we should stop buying that collectively. Just make the decision collectively. We're not eating meat from a meat industry anymore, from that big mass meat industry. We're just not doing that. By the way, we're also going to give $1 more to the farmers in the Amazon that kill the rainforest to have the cows graze. And we give them $1 more to plant trees instead of killing the trees to graze cattle. What do you think what they're going to do if they get $1 more per day? I think they're going to plant trees. It's like 1 and
Yeah.
1 is 2, right? It's very simple. Things are not that complicated.
Yeah.
We make them complicated because it serves a certain purpose and it keeps a few people really rich and wealthy. Let's just not engage with them anymore. That means stop buying their stuff and they'll just lose all the power. Simple. It's very simple.
Yeah.
You don't want to feed Amazon? Don't buy from Amazon. Yeah, you might have to make some changes in your life because whatever. Go through the discomfort, move through the discomfort to actually come out better because we need to learn and grow through discomfort.
Yeah. I'm just having a moment of discomfort because I can hear a chicken in in distress. Speaking of farming, um, so anyway, that aside, the virtue of doing this at home. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, B, for sharing with us. It's been really wonderful, and there will
Thank
be a
you.
link to your work with this video for anybody who's interested in finding out about more about B or about the Alinker or anything else that's happening.
Or the
And
campaign, the Alinker campaign that we have that people can donate trees to. Last week, we actually had somebody who donated $500 there. because they're an Alinker user, and I changed with the Alinker their lives, and they said we want to pay it forward. And they paid $500 to trees. Incredible.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
really.
amazing.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, so on
Yeah,
our website, if you want to have a look at that, we've got there's a fundraising page on our website for the Alinker, and if you go to give to a fundraiser and put in Alinker, it will come straight up.
yeah,
I think you can also probably use the search function as well.
yeah.
So thank you so much to everybody who's been listening. And if you're not already in reciprocity with the trees, we'd really love you to do that. You can join as a business or as an individual, and you can start funding trees for the same price as a cup of coffee every month, and be funding trees all across the tropics in ethical and community-led projects that we're really proud to support. So you can do all
Yeah,
of
Tree
that on our
Sisters is
website.
amazing.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it really is. I mean, employing women to plant the trees. What else? There's no reason not to do that. None.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much again, B, and
Thank you, Pollyanna.
hopefully talk to you again.
Absolutely wonderful. Thanks, everyone.